Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Annazette Houston, and I'm the Chief Diversity Officer here at Hillsborough Community College. It is certainly my honor to serve as the moderator of this panel. Each one of the panelists are distinguished in their own rights, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say. As you know, our topic for today is diversity, equity, and inclusion, open educational resources. In the course of our panel discussion today, we will explore meaningful projects that will highlight OER and how it functions as a tool for social justice. So as an equal opportunity professional, I am looking forward to what our panelists share with us today. So we hope that at the end of our discussion that you'll take away something that will help you in your day-to-day and inform your work. And we will begin our session this morning by having the panelists tell us just a little bit of information about themselves. You all have had an opportunity to review their bios, but we've asked them to share just a little something that little known facts, something that you may or may not know about them, and it'll just something that will help us to understand who they are in this virtual environment. So I'm going to begin by sharing with you that I am also a native of Oklahoma, and that I recently moved to Tampa. So I've been here less than, I think, maybe 6 months. And one of the things that I do or did when I had space, because when I moved to Tampa, I have small space, but I collect culturally diverse cookie jars. And so that's just a little bit about me. And we will begin with Ms. Devika sharing a little bit of biographical information with us, and then something else that's a little more personal.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here to discuss this important topic. So I'm Devika Ramsingh. I am a librarian at Valencia College. I am originally from the Twin Island of Trinidad and Tobago, as you can probably tell from my accent. One thing that is not in my bio that I would like to share is that even though I've been a librarian for over 15 years, librarianship was not my first career choice. I actually fell into that profession. I wanted to be a teacher, and while waiting to be placed, I started working in the university library and fell in love with the profession. And now I enjoy the best of both worlds. I get to teach as a librarian, and I get to help students and do librarian duties.
Thank you. Okay, Miss Gina.
Hi, my name is Gina Oviedo-Martinez. I'm a librarian at Hillsborough Community College. I've been there for 5 years. I've actually worked in all the different kinds of libraries. So I've worked in public and schools and also university, which I think gives me an advantage working with students and getting them used to everything. One thing about it is I'm on the board. I do have autism myself. So my interest in OER materials and how they help with the disabilities is very personal for me. So I am very interested in being on this panel because of that.
Thank you. So, Miss Joy.
Yes, hi. My name is Joy Shumate. I'm the Director of Online Education at College of the Canyons in Southern California. I guess, I don't know if this is really all that fun, but this summer I've spent a lot of time taking my daughter, she is 4, to the beach. So we have spent a lot of time in the sun, and I will say one thing I'm enjoying about us being able to connect virtually is that ability for me to get my work done while sitting on the beach and lounging. So that has been a big part of my days these last couple months, keeping her occupied while getting our good work done. So it's really great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And Dr. Karen.
I am really happy to be here. Very grateful to be invited to this panel of amazing people. And I am currently the program director at the Regional Leaders of Open Education Network, which is part of an OE Global Community College OER project. And so I've also been enjoying the summer. I love kayaking and swimming and playing music with my friends and family. I play a little harmonica and guitar and bass, and so that's about it for me.
So who knew? I should have had you playing background music for us today.
I should say not well, like amateurishly, just for fun.
Well, thank you so much for everyone for sharing information. So we're going to go ahead and just get started with our questions. And so, Joy, our first question for you is, what opportunities does OER present to advance DEI efforts?
Yes, well, I mean, it's a big, lofty question, and I would imagine all of us on the panel could probably spend the next hour just responding to this one question. What I will lead off with is, I think there are a few different approaches to kind of answering this question, and maybe depending on your role on your campus, you might be able to find people who you can work with and you can approach it from different angles. So I think, and we'll get into this further in our discussion today, but a couple of opportunities that I see are, really personalizing learning for students, but also what that does is empowers faculty with the choice that they have for the materials they use and the kind of information that they present to students. As a director in my role, I am an administrator, so also kind of approaching things from an administrative perspective. There's an opportunity to connect OER to larger institutional goals, particularly larger DEI goals that the institution might have. I'm a big proponent of utilizing data to validate and support why OER is so incredibly wonderful for our students. And then I think lastly, I've had the privilege and the opportunity to work on a really important project. It's called Open for Anti-Racism. It's co-directed by CCC OER and College of the Canyons, and generously funded by the Hewlett Foundation. And really the goal of that program is to connect faculty in the California Community College system, put them through a facilitated course, a 6-week course where we learn everything about OER. We have some faculty who don't have any prior knowledge of OER, and others who come with knowledge, but not necessarily understanding or knowing how they can leverage OER to make their coursework anti-racist. So it's a kind of a year-long process, but the idea is that we've structured some training, a facilitated course where we explore what it means to be anti-racist, what anti-racist pedagogy is, what it means to actually have the ability and the power to shape what learning materials you choose to utilize in your classroom, and the opportunities to fill in gaps. We know that maybe not all commercial textbooks address this, and in a lot of ways, sometimes OER is an open way of recreating what already exists, which might leave out the stories and the voices and the contributions of others, and of those who are typically left out of our educational materials. So really that program is just about exploring and truly empowering our faculty who move through the program to envision ways that they can utilize and really leverage open education more broadly, but particularly OER, to make their coursework anti-racist and really frame it in a way that speaks to their interests and really what they want their students to learn and to know. So I will stop there because I can keep going.
Well, that's pretty exciting. You could keep going. I'm trying to take notes and listen as well. I do have a question for you. You said that you have a program called Open for Anti-Racism. So tell us just a little bit more about how that began, and you indicated that it's just for faculty at you said California community colleges?
Yes, yes. So the way this program sort of came about was in the midst of 2020. We were very much in the pandemic. As we all know, our country was in the midst and still is in the midst of a racial reckoning, if you will. And the impetus for this program was, we saw a lot of statements and words come out from probably most of our institutions, maybe the brands we shop at and the things we consume. Many organizations had statements of solidarity or understanding of the time that we are in. But there was a group of us that felt like we wanted to do more. And what do we do? Like, how do we turn those words into action? And so our response through some outside funding was to create this program. And as I mentioned, it's a structured, facilitated course that faculty move through. And what's really important about that course is that the course concludes with an action plan where faculty identify what changes they want to make immediately, like in the following semester in their courses, to specifically leverage OER to advance DEI efforts in their own courses, but also thinking long-term. So what long-term goals, certain changes and tweaks you might want to make in your class might take a little longer than one semester to implement. So, identifying both short-term and long-term goals. And then that following semester, while they're actually implementing those changes in their coursework, the program is structured to have coaches involved to support them with the effort. We have monthly webinars, learning about DEI efforts. So right now the program, it runs annually. We just concluded our second year. And so it previously, and it has been open to instructors in the California Community College system, as part of the structured Open for Anti-Racism program. What I will share with you, though, is we shared the initial course that we developed last year in Canvas Commons. So if any of you use Canvas, please feel free to check the course out. It's openly licensed, pull as much as you would like from it. And we're getting ready to share the second iteration of the course in Canvas Commons probably in the next month. So by all means, even though the program itself has been utilized in the California Community College system, you are more than welcome to adopt the course as you please. And you can always roll it out on your own campuses or just pull materials that maybe you find helpful.
So I have another question for you. What has been the impact from this particular program?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this past year, we had over 40 faculty participate, and we kind of changed our approach this second year to have teams. So instead of maybe one faculty member from different colleges, the California Community College system is a very large community college system. There are 116 colleges. So what we decided to focus on this second year was teams. So teams of 4 to 5 faculty members from colleges who express an interest in participating in the program. And we utilize a research team to actually, to survey students in their experience after they've moved through a course that has been explicitly changed, if you will, modified as a result of the instructor moving through the Open for Anti-Racism program. So we have a lot of feedback from students. And also, we've been kind of measuring and documenting throughout the process the faculty experience, everything from sort of what challenges they were confronted with. I think all of us maybe can relate where we set out with a plan and sometimes things go according to plan and other times they don't quite go according to plan. But what's been really great about this process is being able to document, sometimes the goals are a little lofty to accomplish in one semester, but we found that the faculty, because they build this community moving through the program, are often encouraged to continue the work, after the program concludes. So what's really been important in terms of documenting impact is because faculty are making changes in their course the immediate semester after they could move through the Open for Anti-Racism course, we're able to actually document and note how many students are impacted. Actually, right now, our researchers are we don't have the data on this yet, but what they're going to look at is what were success rates, if you will. So numbers of students succeeding in a course before in that instructor's course before they moved through the Open for Anti-Racism program. What are those rates looking like that semester when they implemented change? And then we're going to document next year moving forward, are we seeing a positive trend, if you will, in the students being impacted through their work? But we definitely have a lot of anecdotal data about students acknowledging the fact that they learned more about their field than they ever had learned before. Students sharing that they got to explore interests and maybe contributors to the field who look like them or share certain experiences that they didn't know necessarily were impactful in their own field. So really kind of validating and honoring the student experience and enabling them to, instead of just being consumers of the knowledge, also being creators of the knowledge, and also, really their resources reflecting them and their coursework reflecting them. So we've received a lot of, anecdotal data about their course as being a very different experience than other courses they've moved through, and kind of wishing that maybe more of their coursework enabled them to really maybe contribute more and learn more about their field in a different way than maybe we typically approach learning and how we share knowledge with our students.
Well, thank you. We could go on, but we've got to move on to another question. So, Ms. Devika, how can OER adoption increase DEI or reinforce equity efforts?
Okay, so OER adoption can impact DEI in various ways. One of the impacts it has on equity efforts is by mitigating the cost of education. So at Valencia, for example, a typical 3-credit hour course is around $350, while some textbooks can cost between $250 to $300, almost the same cost of the course, especially in the sciences. So many students who do not have access to the textbook on the first day of class due to several reasons. They may be seeking alternative options, awaiting financial aid, which can happen up to the 4th week of the semester. This puts them at a disadvantage. But adopting OER ensures that the students have access to their course materials on the first day of class. So it levels that playing field. OER also allows for the use of various formats by various authors. This allows students to have multiple perspectives on a topic rather than having one textbook from one author with one perspective. And the fact that the OER materials are free allows for the use of many resources without additional costs to students. This impacts DEI by encouraging a more culturally responsive teaching pedagogy, and it also encourages students to participate more because they can relate to the material. Our research at Valencia indicated that OER adoption reduced withdrawal rates in classes. So there were some courses that had a very high withdrawal rate. And to find these courses, we were looking everywhere. We were looking at students, why were they withdrawing? We were looking at assessments, we were looking at the faculty, we were looking at the course structure, and we could not identify why the students were withdrawing until we realized that the students were withdrawing when they recognized they were falling behind in the class. And it goes back to not having the materials from the first day of class. So these students did not purchase the textbook because of the prices. And of course, it affected the performance in these classes. And this theory was substantiated when the withdrawal rates decreased after those courses were converted to OER textbooks. So there's a strong correlation between the use of OER, student success, equity in the classroom, leveling that playing field, and involving students to participate by their recognition of course materials.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Miss Gina, question for you. How do OER materials help people with autism, and I want to broaden it as well, and others with disabilities?
One of the biggest things that, especially with autism and also with other disabilities, is financial aspects, like what Devika was saying, are a big concern. It is very difficult for autistic people in general to go to college. Only 38% of them actually complete versus 59% of regular students. So they're already at a disadvantage. The thing with OER materials is because they're free. And also, one of the things I like to talk about is that a lot of them are available online. It gives the students two advantages. It gives them, one is financial problems for employment. With autism, it's a very difficult thing to do, especially while going to college. We have like a hyper-focused kind of mind, so we're like hyper-focused on one thing. So having to work and also go to school at the same time creates like financial difficulties and, you know, problems socially. One of the things that happens with OER materials is because they're free, that gives them more of a like financial gain and looking at the materials, and also they're able to access them easily. And I think it's also helpful because they can go over things in a different way. You don't have to log in and all of those things. Like it avoids a lot of things that could be a problem. And I think especially they could be useful, especially with online classes, which are especially advantageous for autistic students because they have problems with social interactions, which can cause problems in class. So that's why I think so.
Thank you. I'm going to go back. We're going to get to all of our panelists, but I've got to go back to Miss Devika. How can we help faculty to understand or to make the connection between OER and diversity, DEI?
So there are different approaches we can take. One is a connection to the institution. So at Valencia, we are very focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Inclusion and diversity are actually one of the 7 core competencies of a Valencia educator. So this is, once you start Valencia as a faculty member, this is ingrained in you from the beginning. This is what is expected of you. And this encourages faculty to design learning opportunities that acknowledge and are enriched by student activity, diversity, and inclusion. Connecting OER and DEI through that makes faculty accept DEI as part of their responsibilities, and they see their role as a Valencia faculty member. They make that connection to their purpose at the institution. We also do it through professional development. So we offer a lot of OER professional development courses for faculty that emphasize how OER can impact DEI. Faculty generally understands the challenges that students face with accessing their courses. They deal with it on a first-hand basis when students don't have materials the first week of class. And these courses help faculty understand OER to begin with, and then understand how to use OER to alleviate these problems. These courses help faculty in understanding Creative Commons licenses. It shows them how to embed these materials in their classes, and they're different courses for different levels. So it's done on a scaffolding basis. You get an introduction to OER, then you learn about the licenses, then you learn about adoptions, then you learn about creations. So it's all about educating the faculty as well. Another approach is changing the language. So doing it from an again, an institutional and policy perspective. So last year, the Learning Council came together and really developed a equity-focused team that looked at investigating the hypothesis about students benefiting from intentional, equity-minded pedagogical and curricular processes. So one of the recommendations from this was that all of the course learning outcomes be looked at and revised to ensure that it has that equity-minded lens assigned to it. And out of that, the Instructional Materials Committee also updated their policy because they recognized that the Instructional Materials Policy did not mention OER in any way, but faculty members were moving in that direction. So changing that policy also helped faculty recognize the importance of adopting OER. We also incentivized the faculty experience. So over the summer last year, we had a faculty OER Summit professional development course where faculty were incentivized by either getting release time or, depending on their status, they got a stipend. We had 63 faculty members engage in that process. And from that, they had to either develop or adopt an OER for their class. So they saw the impact that this would have on their class. They saw the importance of it. And then we are working with building connections. So our faculty members who go through the tenure process work with our Teaching and Learning Academy. So we're building connections with that Teaching and Learning Academy to make OER one of the core courses for new faculty members. So they get that introduction at the beginning before they even start developing courses. So they have that idea in their mind when they start to develop. And these efforts have had positive impacts at Valencia. We actually did an instructional materials standing committee survey of faculty members September last year. And 44.1% of those faculty members surveyed indicated that they recognize that prioritizing OER materials for students promotes access and supports equity goals of the college. So it starts from the top 10 in faculty members and then go down to actually informing them, training them on how to use these materials. And that has proven to be successful for us.
Okay, thank you. So we've heard from our panelists thus far a lot of given us a lot of examples of how OER benefits and how it supports DEI efforts. But I'm going to have to say, Dr. Karen, why is OER by itself, and when we say OER, we've talked about providing no and primarily low-cost textbooks to all students. Why is OER by itself necessary but not sufficient to address deeper issues of access, social justice, equity, and inclusions for students? And so I know that's a mouthful or a tough question, but can you share with us your thoughts on this?
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, and I love everything that all the other panelists have to say because it all kind of connects together to some of the things that I want to say. And yeah, the idea that a lot of times people think, oh, well, let's just adopt OER and all of our problems will be solved. And I think the other panelists were pointing to the fact that that isn't true. Like just making materials free or openly licensed doesn't automatically guarantee access for all. You know, I've seen the assumption that if we just provide materials for free, that the advantages of free resources are just going to kind of trickle down to everybody else. And we don't really think about like who actually are these materials accessible for? Like, do the intended students have internet bandwidth, for example? Do they have the computers to read it on? We often say in the you know, in the circles in which I travel, you say, oh, here's a free textbook. Now go buy a $900 laptop to read it. You know, like we have to really think about that. And is the OER truly accessible to everyone? For example, to students with disabilities, right? Are students with visual disabilities able to read the materials that you're providing? And so also, just because it's free and theoretically available, is it distributed and used in a way that makes it open for everyone? And I think many folks here were talking about the cultural relevance. Like, do your students actually see themselves reflected in the images, in the examples, in the ideas and the content within OER? So I think we do need to keep asking, like, what do we mean by open and who is open for? Because otherwise we can just replicate the same inequities and power imbalances in our open ed work as we see elsewhere in higher education. And I love the project that Joy was talking about, OFAR. It's an amazing project. There are other projects out there. There's the Rotel project at, there's a consortium of six colleges at in Massachusetts, and Rotel is an acronym that stands for Remixing OER from an equity lens. Remixing open textbooks through an equity lens. And basically what they're doing is sort of collecting data and testing the hypothesis that underrepresented students will achieve higher academic outcomes if free, culturally relevant materials are available to them. And actually it goes beyond cultural relevance, because there's other pieces that we have to think about when we think about what does it mean to involve students in the work of open, because there is a difference between free and open, right? Free, there's a lot of free stuff out there that isn't necessarily open. So when it is open, which means there's an open license on it that can allow for various permissions, like the ability to remix and redefine and reuse, and have a way for people to be able to do the kinds of things that allow the material to be more culturally relevant, but even more so, it allows students to do some of that remixing themselves. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that a bit later if we have some time, because the way that students can remix OER means that they can have their voice be heard, and not just their voice, but their particular epistemic stance on a topic. I also wanted to mention the IDEA framework, which stands for Inclusive, Diverse, Equity, Anti-Racism Framework, which is developed by a group at the Academic Senate for California. I don't want you to think California is doing everything, because the IDEA framework is being put out more broadly across the US and actually outside of the US, and used as sort of an audit framework to look at things like illustrations and photos, example names that you're using, gender inclusive language, use of pronouns, historical references. So there's ways that can help people think about the OER that they're creating. And so keeping those kind of questions about, is the work truly open for everyone at the forefront, instead of just thinking, oh, if I just open this, everybody will have access.
So, you know, I'm a DEI person, and so and we're talking about OER. What is the intersection of these two areas? And Joy, I'm going to ask you to talk about, why is it important for DEI and OER to overlap?
Sure. Well, I feel everything that the panelists have said thus far really resonate with me, and especially hearing what Karen just said, I feel in a lot of ways that a lot of what Karen mentioned really addresses sort of the why, like the why behind why we should do all of this. You know, what really stood out to me was Karen said, you know, free doesn't necessarily mean open. So, you know, I think, again, there are a few approaches we can take to kind of making that connection between OER and DEI. And I think, you know, in a lot of ways, you can frame this and kind of approach it based on who it is you're talking to, or maybe who you're trying to convince. You know, from in my work with faculty, personally, my experience, not just through the Open for Anti-Racism program, but also on my own campus, a a lot of it has been about empowering faculty to be able to make choices for the materials they utilize and for their students in a way that maybe adoption or utilizing publisher textbook may not necessarily always allow. So there's the opportunity to I say fill in gaps, but really it's about enabling a broader truth or history to be told, whatever that is in your discipline as the content expert, that opportunity to really personalize and shape the learning. Again, maybe names, images referenced, how can you personalize that to your students in your college, in your area? And the great thing about open is then, any one of us can adopt it and do the same thing and personalize for our own students. So there's kind of the broader ability to really take a step back and say, how can I make this culturally relevant? But there's also the ability for faculty, I hope, to feel empowered to really kind of evaluate what it is they're teaching and, kind of that backwards design, like what are the outcomes that you're trying to accomplish and how do you get there? And I really believe firmly that OER and open enables faculty to do that, to kind of work backwards to maybe redesign and reshape the materials they're using in a way that's more meaningful for them as an instructor and therefore more meaningful and more relevant for their students. And also, I think it's really important to recognize and kind of acknowledge that sustainability is often a challenge maybe with OER. I think we're all looking for ways to better sustain the work, to fund the work, to keep it going. Any kind of effort is iterative, so we want to keep improving, and how do we keep sustaining that work? And again, I think that's where tying to larger institutional goals, Devika mentioned how OER is really ingrained and DEI is really ingrained in the work at her college. So, what are those larger institutional goals? In my college, at College of the Canyons, we really look at what are our disproportionately impacted student groups. Who are the students that we are currently leaving behind? And then we take a step back and look at, okay, how can we maybe address and make some positive changes to better support those students? So, for us, those disproportionately impacted student groups can be our student veterans, there are Latinx and Black students, there are students with disabilities. What can we do to address the needs of those students so that we're not leaving entire groups of students behind in our efforts to maybe advance other work? So that's again where I think data is really important. So really looking at when you're making these changes and implementing OER, and when you're implementing OER specifically with a DEI lens, really tracking and measuring the data so that you generally have something to stand on to say, look, this work is meaningful. It connects to our larger institutional goals. Therefore, whatever, I don't like to frame it in terms of a return on investment, but that is sometimes in a way an approach we need to justify maybe the funds to support these efforts, to pay faculty stipends to engage in this work. But when you tie it to larger institutional goals, perhaps the investment really isn't all that great for outcomes that are even greater. And when we say we're really committed to DEI, any kind of positive improvement is worth the investment, and it is worth sustaining the effort and the work. And I think just lastly, as it relates to institutional goals, we find ourselves now in this place trying to emerge out of COVID, and, I know on our campus, we're looking at enrollments, and across the board, college enrollment is down. And I'm not saying that OER is the one quick fix, but, again, kind of tying in OER and our DEI efforts to our institutional goals of, how do we perhaps leverage OER and particularly culturally relevant OER to help bolster, enrollment? How do we make the material relevant so that students feel like it's actually worth it for them to re-enroll in our colleges? So really utilizing, measurement and data, but tying the work, so that it doesn't just exist in this silo where you or a couple people on your campus believe firmly in it, but just preaching it again and again from the mountaintops about the value, and being able to, really call on either existing data from other campuses, or, engaging your own maybe researchers, institutional researchers, or data folks at your campus, to really bring them into this work, so that the institution as a whole might better understand the value and the meaning behind connecting OER to DEI, and how it can have benefits beyond just the students we touch, which is most important, but have meaning and impact for the institution at large.
So I have another question just for the panelists in general. We've talked a lot. We're talking about open access, OER in the classroom. We have a whole nother spectrum of individuals that work with our students that are in student affairs, not in academic affairs. When we talk about DEI professionals, we spend a lot of our time working with compliance, and so we're all in our own little silos. And so everything that we've shared today is amazing information, but how do we, one, get the information to the campus as a whole, and then how do we get this information, or how do we help others who teach in a different format, not in the classroom, but are providing learning opportunities for our students in other areas? How do we get them to embrace OER in the spaces that they manage?
If you're throwing that out there, generally, I'm happy to take a stab at it. But if someone else would rather go first, I'm happy. So one of the things that we do with Arlo is help people build, help individuals build strategic plans for their institution, and that involves building a team. So it can't just be one person or just the faculty member acting in isolation in their own classroom, or some lone person in the library, but having institutional teams that include the student support services that you mentioned, as well as librarians, instructional technology people, throw in a dean. We help people build an institutional team so that you're building it into the fabric of the values of the institution. And because it's connected to the very goals that people want for their institutions, which is increasing student success and retention and all those things, that I think people will really start to see that open education becomes a lever for accomplishing those kinds of things. And maybe it's not the only thing, but it's really powerful. And I often say to people, what else do you have right now? Because in fact, openness, I think, is pretty exciting and has the potential. And it's so much not about resources. And stop me if I'm going on too long, because I talk a lot about this too. Like, the open pedagogical practices have to be more important than just the focus on building a set of resources. And if we keep trying to compete with commercial textbook companies, we're actually not going to be successful. But what they can't take away from us and commodify is our pedagogical practices. But me as a professor in my classroom, I can't do it alone. I need that team of support of people. I need people in student success to understand, if I'm, it's not about a lone professor making an attendance policy. It's about all of us understanding that there are reasons that students don't show up for class sometime. And if my pedagogy is about allowing students to have their own voice and work at their own pace and contribute to the construction of the syllabus and even contribute to the idea that they can grade themselves. And I know I'll get a little bit controversial here, but open pedagogical practices can tap into the ways in which we can allow students to even shape the canons in their fields a little bit more and actually address some of the problems that are critically facing our planet. So I'm piling a lot on to the answer to your question, but the idea that we have institutional teams that work together to address the problems for our institutions, which do mirror and reflect our societal cultural problems. And I think open education is a super powerful lever in helping us to get there, and that almost everybody would kind of understand it and allow it to work with the other kinds of things that we're doing on our campus.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I wanted to say something. One of the things that we've done at our school to kind of support not only open educational resources, but just having access in general is our school provides laptops that can be checked out, which I know one of the other panelists was talking about the cost of having like a laptop at home, and we also have hotspots that we lend out so that if someone doesn't have internet access at their house, that they have access to that, which pulls in different departments and different parts of the college that are working with us to make sure that everyone has access to what they need to get access to. And if they're having those type of problems, which open access resources, if they can't be accessed, obviously aren't useful. And having laptop checkout or a hotspot checkout, I think adds to the availability, and it's also a type of open access resource, you know?
If I could add to Karen's point, I've been involved in OER at Valencia since 2015. And initially our OER team was made up of librarians, and we struggled. We really struggled. And once we moved to that institutional committee and college-wide committees that involved instructional designers, faculty members, librarians, support staff, we saw that momentum pick up, and it also helped with duplication of efforts. Because so many people were working in silos, doing their own thing on each campus, we recognized that they were doing the same things, using the same time, the same resources, when one could have shared their resources with the other and worked towards developing new resources. So that college-wide commitment also have that duplication and propelled OER a lot more at Valencia.
Okay. I'm assuming that you had your DEI professional on the committee.
Yes, we did.
Okay, well, thank you. Anyone else want to add to that? We're good? All right, well, another question is just, we've touched on it in different places. We've talked about OER. We'll have the books available as soon as classes start, which being a disability professional, that's, you know, anytime I hear that, that's exciting because it presents challenges for individuals, for students who do not have disabilities, and it's really even problematic for other students with disabilities. But can we talk about how OER reduces the stress for our students with disabilities, but just stress overall for our students? And I guess we can start with Gina.
What I was gonna say is one of the biggest things is sometimes, you know, like there can be computer problems like accessing into Canvas and things like that with those materials, because they're open, they're accessible without going through all of you know, that process. And I think that helps a lot. That, in my opinion, it's a small thing, but I think it helps.
Anyone else as you think about stress? Dr. Karen.
Yeah, thanks. I think that the biggest thing that students often feel stressed about is, am I doing a good job? What is my grade? Like, where does their stress come from? And there's so much that we as faculty can do, but with a support team of people to help students not feel stressed. And I think it can kind of be a message to students that I care about you. I'm using a material that reflects you. I'm asking you to contribute to the way that you can create knowledge within your own classroom. And so I'm communicating to you that I care about you. I want to hear your voice. I want you to show up. I want you to want to come to class. I'm not making an attendance policy because you want to come to class so much. We don't need one. And that actually reduces stress. And I've seen this kind of thing happen in open pedagogy classes. And so I think we need to take a broader view of stress in this way.
I think that might be a topic for our next discussion. So actually, thank you for sharing that. We are coming to the close of our session, and you know, we've asked you a number of questions, but we want to give each of you an opportunity to leave us with something that you anything that you'd like to share with us, and we'll give you a couple of minutes to just share your final thoughts on this particular topic. Ms. Devika.
So I would advise that you share the workload, as Karen said. Don't attempt this on your own. Involve as many stakeholders as possible. Involve students. Go to your student organizations, get them involved, collect data, as many surveys as you can collect. We spent the last 2 semesters surveying students, faculty, anyone who uses OER, just to get their input so that we can know what's working and what's not working, how we can change things. So really just get everybody, all those stakeholders on board, work together as a team. If you have multiple campuses, do it college-wide, institution-wise. That's going to help you propel your OER and DEI efforts.
Okay, Ms. Gina.
I think I worked with another department to produce an OER class, and so I think one of the biggest things is getting professors and librarians and like what Devika said, like getting different people involved. And I think people that are having success in those areas, I think the biggest important part is to share that with their colleagues, to get other people interested versus, like using the standard $300 textbooks, which we're used to using. Getting people to change is really difficult. So I think that using peer review of the situation and sharing success stories will help, propel OER into a more normal or more like accepted area for teaching. And I think that really will help the most is by sharing.
Okay, Ms. Joy.
Sure. Gosh, I guess if there's a takeaway, or maybe just to sum up what's kind of floating around in my head right now, I think really it's about understanding your own why for even engaging in this work. I think we all know that when we dive into OER and when we dive into DEI work, those are not easy lifts, but as the other panelists have said, calling on the expertise and the strengths of others is really how we succeed in our efforts to expand the good work that each of us are creating, producing, adopting, revising, and also enables us the opportunity to really advance DEI efforts, but kind of asking the why, not because it's the buzzword kind of topic to use right now, but because of the impact. And really, I think when we keep student success front and center at that, then that explains the why. That's why each of our commitment, all of us here, in this virtual room, why our commitment to DEI is important, and how we can leverage not only OER, but as Karen mentioned, open pedagogical practices to really keep student success front and center. And really, I'm excited because OER, and especially with this emphasis on DEI, really enables us to shift and I think move our approach to supporting students in a way that maybe we previously hadn't approached, but that really supports and embraces student experience, is reflective of our students, enables students to not only see themselves, but really become contributors in a field. So there are so many opportunities that OER enables. And I think just particularly when we keep student success front and center, then it's kind of a no-brainer as to why approaching OER from a DEI perspective is so very critical and important. But again, just calling on the resources at your institutions to support the work, to sustain the work and keep it moving forward, I think is how we all can keep up this good work and this hard work and keep it moving forward.
Thank you. Dr. Karen.
Yeah, I wanna say that we hear a lot about centering students and putting students first, but like I want us all to think authentically, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to really center your students? And Jesse Stommel once said, start by trusting students. Like, what does it mean to actually trust your students? And to also recognize that not all students have the same amount of power and privilege in the classroom. What does it mean to see your students and understand their place? And what does it mean for a faculty member to give up some of their power and privilege? And in other cases, maybe needing to think about the power and privilege dynamics within the classroom. But when you give students agency, when we as a faculty, not just a faculty community, as a campus community, can provide students with the agency to help them learn for themselves and be able to contribute knowledge, as we've been talking about, then everything can shift in the way that their success is going to be better, the institutional success is going to be better. So providing students with agency and thinking about how that contributes to their learning, and how we as a campus community keep a laser focus on giving students voice and agency, and especially students in particular backgrounds that have been typically marginalized. Like, design your program for the most marginalized student, and everything else, everybody else will be benefiting from that as well. And I think others have said that too. So.
Well, thank you. As I think about the audience here today, we have people from the East Coast, the West Coast, North, South. We have individuals that are here from other countries. So this has been an international event. But with that being said, in several of our locations, there are some legal challenges. But what I would like to hear from you is, where can we go, whether we're faculty or staff member or just a person who's interested in improving the outcomes by using OER, enhancing our DEI efforts? What are some things we should be reading? Where should we go? What organization should we seek for information? I got a librarian, so I know I'm going to get some good answers to that. So share with us.
There is so much information on OER available even within my school databases, and also, of course, like openly on the internet, and how to implement them into your classroom, what benefits they have. And there's so many statistics available that can be used in presenting to other staff or things like that. But I would definitely recommend going into what you have at your school, because there's a lot available right there in the databases for you.
I would share you can explore other schools as well, see what they're doing and how you can adapt to what they are doing. There are also many repositories available. In Florida, we have FLVC. They have a lot of information on OER. I would call a name, I don't know if she's here, but Rebel. She is a really good source you can reach out to, and she guides you along. She gives you tips and other sources that you can build upon. So definitely look at success stories, look at what other people are doing, and that can motivate you as well.
And I am walking away with a renewed understanding of OER. And then also, as a DEI professional, I'm going to find different ways to intersect the work that I'm doing to assist in this area. So thank you, each of you, for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Enjoy your day.